floor. Please join me in Gasho. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namadatsu, namadatsu. So the chant that we're going to do tonight is the Jusei Ge. That is on page 54 of the Red Book, or with a PDF that is provided by our webpage. Gagon Josegan Ishi Mujodo Shigan Fumanzok Seifu Joshogak Gao Muryoko Fui Dai Seishu Fusai Shobingu Seifu Joshogak Gashi Jobutsudo Myosho Chojipo Kukyo Mishomon Seifu Joshogak Ryoku Jinshonen Joe Shubongyo Shigu Mujodo Isho Tenninshi Jinniki Endai Ko Fusho Musaido Shoujo Sankumyo Kosai Shuyakunan Kaihi Chiegen Meshi Komoan Heisoku Shoakudo Tsudatsu Zenshumon Koso Jomanzok Iyorojipo Nichigatsu Shujuki Tenko Onfugen Ishu Kaihozo Kose Kudokuho Jodai 修十説法四識供養一切仏具足修徳本元年出場満徳意三害を如仏無下知通達未不詳願学営力投資最小損志願若か大仙お感動国書天人東宇妙家ナマンダムナマンダムナマンダムナマンダムナマンダムナマンダム願にしく読平等性祭同発菩提心往生安楽と。Namadats, namadats, 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 namadats. So I'd like to read some words from Shinran Shonin. So if you could please join me in Gasho. Since Shinjin arises from the vow, we attain Buddhahood through the Nembutsu by the vow's spontaneous working. The spontaneous working is in itself the fulfilled land. Our realization of supreme nirvana is beyond doubt. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namadats. Again, good evening, everyone. Nice to see you. What I just read there was a quotation from Shinran Shonin, our founder, and he's talking about spontaneous working, which is going to be the subject of what I would like to talk about tonight. You'll have to excuse me. It's been a very busy day. For those that are familiar with our national organization, the Buddhist Churches of America, we're having our national council meeting in Sacramento. And so I am flying out at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning, which means that I'm being picked up at 4 o'clock here at the temple to go to the airport. So I've been running around getting everything ready for the trip. And then it's like, oh my gosh, that's right, we've got service tonight. So, and also with a little bit of our technical issues as well. But I think part of it is that when you're getting ready for a trip, is that, you know, the idea of being prepared, that we like to have everything organized, and it's a necessity. I tend to be a procrastinator, and in the past, I used to pack the morning of the trip, and I've learned that mistake. At my magical age of 62, I finally realized that that's not the way to get ready for a major trip, especially when you're leaving at 4 in the morning. But it's a balancing act because my cat is very bright. And so once she sees the suitcase, she knows that I'm leaving, and then I'm trying to put clothes in and she's climbing in it, you know, the routine. But it does remind you about the organization of how we do things. And so in the middle of all of this, now that the phone system has been changed here at the New York Buddhist Church, if you call during business hours and you press the button that says, if you want to talk to the religious department, it will ring through to my cell phone. And we've only done this for about 2 weeks, and it's been a great experience because whenever I'm able to answer the phone, I obviously do. And people are so used to going to voicemail. Every time I pick up the phone, they say, "Thank you for answering the phone." And last week, I was able to do an interview for the Voice of America simply because I picked up the phone at the right time. And so I was interviewed on Friday, and it was about the New York Buddhist Church, but I did tell the board members at Ekoji, I did mention Ekoji, so hopefully that won't be edited out. If that does, we will have the public domain for that interview, and I can share that with Ekoji as well. But with the spontaneous of the phone is that you don't know what you're going to call. A lot of times there's like, as a student, can you talk to me about what basic Buddhism is? And I got a very frantic call today from a woman who identified as older. I found out during our conversation that she was in her mid 70s, and she was panicking because she's losing her apartment. And she says, I need to talk to a rabbi or a minister. So I had spoken to her previously, but that conversation was a very calm discussion about what the difference is with ideas of Buddhism and some of her beliefs that she was raised as in Judaism. But this time she's like, I am out, I have lost control. I have no control. And I was trying to talk to her to calm her down. And it is horrifying. I mean, the idea of being at any age with the possibility of losing your housing. And I won't go into details about the circumstances that led up to this, but I think that she kept saying, she says, I've done everything I can. It's all my fault. And she kept saying that over, and I tried to diffuse that with her. And the idea is that, that urgency, for her was very real. Even she did finally calm down. And so the idea is that to focus on what she could focus on. So she has a meeting tomorrow with someone that will hopefully be able to help her. But people are that way with the idea of organizing and having everything in control. And that's also can go on to our understanding or how we interact with our spiritual life. And as I've mentioned in this session before, that I know that the word spirituality or religion are hot words for certain people, but when I use them, they're interchangeable, meaning that when you follow a teaching that goes beyond our secular everyday world, like Buddhism is a philosophy, religion, teaching. And so with her, the idea is like I've had people that have come up to me that want me to give them specific answers. I mentioned before that one of the members here at New York is dealing with cancer and was wanting me to give her a specific practice for her to reach the Pure Land. And in our understanding of Jodo Shinshu, we don't have those exact answers that sometimes people need. And so what you do is you talk to the people and process what they're feeling and what their emotional and what their spiritual needs are. And so I can understand that. So the people will come in and they'll say, well, I need a practice. So today we talked about doing the breathing meditation with the woman I spoke to on the phone. But then, the idea of that I've done everything that I can. And I pointed back that, no, you haven't done everything that you can. And so part of that is understanding that when we look at the spiritual realm about our Jodo Shinshu path is the understanding that nothing is completely set. Nothing is 100%. There's nothing that we as persons can do. Now we talk about self-power and other power, and it can be very dualistic because people will think, oh, well, I don't have any input on what's for my reaching nirvana or reaching the Pure Land upon death or enlightenment. But the idea is that there is an engagement that we do have some control over. And so as part of the Mahayana tradition, Jodo Shinshu doesn't focus on enlightenment as much as the idea of understanding our Buddha nature. And as we have discussed before, the concept is a very Mahayana concept that instead of looking at the Buddha and enlightenment as something dualistic, something that is separate from us, we understand that with the Mahayana teachings and Jodo Shinshu, we talk about that the Buddha nature, that potentiality is within us all. And so the idea of how we work with that and how much control do we have over that and what do we need to do is I think that Shinran Shoni made it very clear that he tried to make the path what he called the easy path, a way that is less anxiety provoking. I know that, sometimes I know that for Eric, who also went through ordination, we get tested on ritual, you get tested on doctrine, and it's very, very stressful. But the idea is that it shouldn't have to be that way. The idea is that we're trying to share and understand the teachings. So this idea of Buddha nature is very simple to understand. Some people have given, some Zen monks have given the example of like that enlightenment or our Buddha nature is like a mirror, that it's covered with dust and dirt. And what we need to do is with our mind is to clear off that dust so that we can see clearly. And then realize that, that's already within us. It's just our not being able to see that. Here at New York, I have 3 ministers' assistants that have received ordination. They're very highly educated and they do wonderful classes. And one of them is they do a discussion group on Saturdays. And if my schedule permits, I will join in. And sometimes, because some of the people online are professors, so it can get pretty academic or pretty involved. And they were discussing an article that was written by Mark Uno. And they were talking about what they were focusing on was that all of the humanity, everyone are different cogs in this wheel or the system of the Dharma or of Buddha nature, and that we are simply a cog in this. And this is what Dr. Uno had touched upon. And so they're going back and forth and discussing, that all of the interconnectedness, when we talk about no one or nothing can survive on its own, what my actions do will not impact only myself, but others. And then if I impact others, then they impact others. So it's like this ripple effect or intrica's net, where there's all of these points that have all of these immeasurable ways that are connected. And so I said to them, because they were talking about the cog and how that intrica's net, there's different points and there's all these different spheres. And then I said, well, I think in my understanding of Jodo Shinshu or Shinran's teachings is that he's wanting us to not emphasize that we are the cog, that instead what we're focusing on that we are part of the interconnectedness, and it's not focusing on Kurt as this clog and that Daniel is this clog or whatever. The idea is that the teachings, the Dharma, and our Buddha nature all interact and we're flowing whether we participate in that or not. And as I mentioned in a previous class, Shinran Shonin did go through rigorous practices on Mount Hiei as a Tendai monk, where you would spend hours doing a physical practice or doing deep meditation or doing doctrinal research and debate. That's another thing that I don't know if I've mentioned before, but in Mount Hiei, a lot of times, which is very popular, especially in Chinese Buddhism, there would be debates among the monks about a key concept. This is what my understanding of karma is. And then they would have these debates to increase everybody's knowledge. But then with Shinran, he was saying that he came out of 20 years of this type of practice and it wasn't as meaningful for him. So this idea of jinen, or what we're talking about today, this idea of naturalness or spontaneous working, which is another way to look at it in the English language, is that it's the wonder of understanding that this process has been started. Now, the Wasan, or the reading that I read from Shinran Shonin, I'll reread it again. It says, when we attain Buddhahood through the Nembutsu by the vows, spontaneous working, this jinen. Okay, so what it's saying is that the vows have this natural ongoing working that is devoid or not necessarily having us to be involved. By the vow, spontaneous working, the spontaneous working itself is the fulfilled land or the pure land. Our realization of supreme nirvana is beyond doubt. So one of the things I spoke to Eric here just before class, and he was asking questions about nirvana. I guess this came up at Ekoji last week. I don't know if it was a personal conversation or if it was in the Dharma exchange. But the idea is that nirvana, because the question that he asked is that did Shakyamuni Buddha, though he reached enlightenment in his lifetime, did he go to nirvana? Did he reach, the pure nirvana? And as I've talked about in other classes, there is the idea of para-nirvana. So the idea that nirvana is something that someone can experience in this lifetime, but para-nirvana is the final extinction. And many of you are aware that the word nirvana means to extinguish. And a lot of times they use the metaphor of a candle being blown out. That's our attachments, that's our passions. And so nirvana is the extinguishing of all of those hindrances that we have to see things as they truly are. In other words, enlightenment. And so what Shinran is pointing, again, the idea of this spontaneous working, you could say doctrinally, he would say that this is coming from Amida. This is coming from not from ourselves, but from the Amida fulfilling the vows or the Buddhist teachings that they are already have started. And this beyond the supreme nirvana is beyond doubt. And that's for Ken, because he loves to say, is it for everybody? Is it definite? And yes, it is. So getting back to the word, I really liked this word jinen. It was a theme at IBS many, many years ago, and it's multifaceted. And unfortunately, with our technical difficulties, I was going to show the kanji or the characters, but that's not going to happen tonight. But the word for the jinen is that spontaneous is also naturalness. And actually, there are many books that are written on this. And so it's the idea is that when we look at the teachings are inherently in motion already, that they are completely founded so that we will be able to engage with them. And to contrast with that, the spontaneous working is that, there's the other word, hoben, which means a calculating mind. And the calculating mind is what we all have. I think that's what we're all encouraged with, especially those of us that have gone in our education, beyond high school. You're supposed to have critical reasoning. You're supposed to calculate. And what they're saying is that, again, this idea of the naturalness is that with a calculating mind that we can go on the wrong track, so to speak. A perfect example of this is that, people will ask me, well, in Buddhism, what happens, where do we come from? And as we know that, a lot of people's view of what a spiritual tradition is or a religion is that it talks about the origins of where we come from. And I have to be very careful in how I respond to that because the Buddha does not address this. And people will say, well, what do you mean the Buddha did not address this? And the reason is that because the Buddhist teachings are focused on this life and for us to reach nirvana, for us to have that cessation at the end of the life and not to be reborn. But they say, well, what about where do we come from? And without sounding rude, you say, well, that wasn't the point of the Buddhist teachings. So some people have said, well, can I believe that there's a God that created us? And that's your personal opinion. The Buddha did not contradict that. And then they say, but why didn't he? I said, the whole point is that he wanted us to focus on this life, which is the life that we do have control over in order for us to be able to reach our spiritual goal of, or not goal, but the final conclusion of reaching nirvana. So today, I'd like us to think, when we think about the Dharma and this naturalness, it's quite a beautiful thing that the idea is that when we get together for at Ekoji or whatever temple, whether it's virtual or in person, the idea is for us to hear the teachings, which we talked about last week, the deep listening, deep hearing. And the idea is for us to realize that this naturalness and the spontaneity of reaching and understanding the Buddha Dharma together. So I'd like to conclude with the words of Shinran Shonin. Can you please join me in Gasho? Since Shinjin arises from the vow, we attain Buddhahood through the Nembutsu, by the vow's spontaneous working. The spontaneous working is itself the fulfilled land. Our realization of supreme nirvana is beyond doubt. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo. So if you could join me in a group reading together, please. Let's read the Jodo Shinshu Creed number 2 on page 4 or in the PDF. The Creed number 2. Casting off the self-power mind of the varied practices and disciples, we entrust ourselves single-mindedly to Amida Tathagata to save us in regard to the one great matter of birth. With one thought moment of entrusting, we know that we are saved and that our birth is settled. After this, we say the name in joy and gratitude, repaying the Buddha's graciousness. We acknowledge gratefully that we are able to hear and understand this teaching because of the benevolence of our master, having appeared in this world, and of the successors in the transmission, the good teachers whose words were not shallow. Beyond this, we will observe the established rules of conduct throughout our lives. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Okay, so if you could join me in a very quick silent meditation, please. So please sit erect, relax your shoulders, your feet on the floor. Please join me in Gasho. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namadas.